first of all, I don't think anybody is the face of the franchise.
Right.
The logo is the face of the franchise, and I'll repeat that as many times as someone asks me that.
Ah, yes, classic Lou Lamoriello. But he sure paid Matthew Barzal like the face of the franchise, didn't he? Over $9 million a season for a guy who's been a point-a-game player once in his career. Was it too much? Well, Cheryl Pounder and Pierre LeBrun are going to check in to discuss that and much, much more today on Got Your Back NHL Edition. Thank you so much for downloading and tuning in, folks, to Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug, proudly brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. You know, when it comes to the construction industry, there is nothing that Cross Country Canada can't handle. Companies wanting to build a road, they've got everything you need, from the survey equipment to plan it out, the equipment to haul and move dirt, even the material you lay down to stabilize the terrain. You can get all of it at Cross Country Canada. They even have all the safety gear for the workers, things like road markers, flagging, two-way radios, even custom make all the signage that is needed. Basically, with Cross Country Canada, if they don't rent it or sell it, you do not need it. Truly, a Canadian company, Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, are our title sponsor. Welcome to episode 2 of Got Your Back, LeBrun and Rishaug. Folks, lots ahead on the show today. We'll check in with Scott Burnside with another edition of Straight to the Point. We will have a quandary that we threw out to you on Twitter, an interesting one involving hotel soaps. Do you have a right to just take them? We're going to dive deeper into that. We're going to go round the horn in our breakdown, NHL news and notes, including that Barzal contract. We'll talk a little bit about Shane Wright and Slafkovsky, see how they're doing in their respective camps. But before we get to Pierre and to Cheryl Pounder, of course, there were some meetings yesterday. Once again, Hockey Canada interim chair Andrea Skinner and former chair Michael Brindamore once again were front and center with the Canadian Heritage Committee answering questions. It was an interesting day. Rick Westhead has been front and center in reporting on this entire story, and we took a few minutes to check in with TSN's Rick Westhead. Rick, I know it's been a busy time. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to catch up with us here. We'll get to the meetings yesterday, but first there was some breaking news out of Quebec this morning as a result of yesterday's meetings, some reporting through the CBC. Can you bring us up to speed on the latest?
Yeah, for sure. And this has been simmering for a bit, even within Quebec. After the parliamentary hearings on Tuesday, Hockey Quebec last night held a vote of non-confidence, CBC's reporting, and has decided that it no longer, as a federation, has the confidence in Hockey Canada and has decided to sever ties to the national organization. This has been brewing for a while. When I was in Edmonton this summer for the World Juniors, I was talking with officials from Hockey Quebec who were trying to figure out what the road was going to look like that they were going to go down, but they were not happy with how Hockey Canada had handled things even to that point before the hearings this week. Yeah,
and in the reporting here, it says to effectively change the culture of hockey with the structure in place. That wording seems to me to allude to leadership. Is that the structure that you think is at issue here?
I think it's a good assumption. And, Hockey Canada's leadership, that is the front and center topic. Now it's so interesting how over the last months, this discussion, this reporting has kind of evolved from looking specifically at allegations around an alleged sexual assault in 2018, that purportedly involved players, former Canadian Hockey League players who were members of Canada's World Juniors team. But after those allegations, which have still not been proven in court, as media and parliamentary members started to dig deeper, questions were raised about, well, how did they handle this? And I think there were, for people who haven't followed along too closely, there were some real shocking moments along the way. We heard in June, for instance, that when Hockey Canada commissioned a Toronto law firm to do an investigation, all the interviews that this law firm did were voluntary. And 10 players on the team, that was it. 10 players agreed to be interviewed by Hockey Canada. And, and if the ones that refused, there were no consequences. We also learned, Hockey Canada said, listen, the woman in this case did not want to proceed with this. She wanted this dropped. And her lawyer later said that's not true, that she, in the days after this alleged incident, went to police in London, did a rape kit, gave them the clothes she was wearing, showed them pages and pages of text messages and photos. So there has been it's been really interesting to kind of watch the way the National Federation has responded, and some of the bombshells that we've learned as well about not just one but two funds that have been managed to try to pay out claims that are related to sexual assault allegations. One of those funds has never been drawn on or used to this point, but the other fund, the National Equity Fund, has. And I think from the feedback I get from people, Ryan, what's most alarming about this, it's a question of transparency. People who have these claims, it's good that they are settled. It's good that they are looked after. But minor hockey parents across Canada deserve to know where the money is going that they're paying every year.
So with the hearings that happened yesterday with the interim chair, Andrea Skinner, the former chair, Michael Brindamore, it's the second set of hearings that we've heard. It seemed they took on a bit of a different tone, Rick. Hockey Canada maybe bringing more of a defensive posture into this set of meetings. What was your sense of the tone of things yesterday?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I think actually Hockey Canada's public messaging has done a 180 over the last months. Like if you remember, wasn't that long ago that Hockey Canada was very conciliatory and saying, conceding that there has been a toxic culture in the sport, admitting that the public's trust has been broken, and saying that it's committed to trying to do better. Those days seems like ages ago now. Now what we hear from Hockey Canada is that they're being unfairly targeted with criticism in the media, that people are not focusing enough on the good deeds that the Federation is doing, and that status quo is needed, that we need to have the current leadership in place. As Andrea Skinner put it, if there was a complete purge of the top leaders at Hockey Canada, she said yesterday that would be negative for boys and girls across Canada. And how would the lights stay on in hockey rinks across the country?
Yeah, that was definitely one of those statements that caught headlines. Another one was asked to grade Scott Smith's performance. She gave him an A, in a time and place where there was a lot of calls for change at the top. There was some development in terms of an independent audit that's going to be expanded. Just take us through what the news was on the independent audit front yesterday.
Sure. Well, we already knew that there was going to be an audit to explore whether government money was used to pay out the settlement in this lawsuit connected to the 2018 incident, right? This woman, just again to recap, earlier this spring, a woman who was allegedly assaulted back in 2018 filed a lawsuit against Hockey Canada for just over $3.5 million. And that lawsuit was settled very quickly in a span of weeks. So the government was already trying to look to find out whether public money was used in that payout. What our reporting has shown more recently is, there are questions about how Hockey Canada's board has been spending the Federation's money. I talked, and a member of Parliament talked to a former board member who talked about how championship rings, when the women's national team, World Juniors teams win championships, that rings, not for players but for board members, are bought at a price of over $3,000 a piece. There have been questions about how much money they're spending on dinners, how much money they're spending on hotel presidential suites. We had confirmation on Tuesday from Michael Brindamore that this money has been spent on dinners. He said, yeah, well, if we did this, it was probably for a very special event. Mm-hmm. And he also confirmed the price tag for championship rings. So what the government agreed to do after the hearings on Tuesday was a more exhaustive and thorough audit. An NDP member of Parliament named Peter Julian has been pressing for this for weeks. And yesterday, the government actually agreed on that. So what this means is that they will be digging into every receipt that's been submitted for an expense, every dinner, every hotel, back to 2016. Right. There's a management company in Gatineau, Quebec called Sampson and Associates. They're already doing, the kind of surface level audit to see about settlement funds. You'd expect, just so you're not avoiding duplication, that the government would ask them to do the more extensive deep dive as well. And again, the timing on this, they believe that both audits will be done sometime this fall.
Next steps. Bob Nicholson is going to be called. He'll be the next to answer questions. what areas do you think they'll dig into with Nicholson, and what do you think the tone will be of that next set of questions?
Well, I haven't had a really good track record of predicting what the tone will be in advance.
Yeah.
I thought, Ryan, that Tuesday's hearing was going to be cordial, like friendly even. I was not expecting that we'd see Rachel Thomas, a conservative member of parliament who's, hasn't been front and center in these hearings. She was literally yelling at Andrea Skinner yesterday, asking how one could expect that if you have the status quo, that somehow magically there's going to be change, appreciable change. I think there's going to be questions for Bob Nicholson about how this fund was started, about, there's so many questions we don't have answers to yet. Sheldon Kennedy is obviously a name that Canadians know as an abuse survivor of Graham James. And I honestly knew his story kind of surface level. I read his book again recently. The police believe that Graham James has more than 150 victims. I only know of 3 of those who've been public, right? We know that Sheldon Kennedy has, Theron Fleury has, Greg O'Hooley, a lawyer, has also been public as a survivor of Graham James. That leaves still almost 150. So there's going to be a lot of questions, I think, for Nicholson about what are the prospects for the other victims coming forward, how many settlements have been reached, how Hockey Canada historically has investigated these. Has the Federation investigated them themselves? How many complaints have actually been found credible enough to actually dig deep into versus those that they just haven't investigated at all? And I wonder if he's also going to be asked about what's happening at the provincial level. How many complaints are going to Hockey Alberta? How many to the Ontario Hockey Federation? How many have gone to Hockey Quebec? And what has been the outcome of all of those complaints as well?
It's been some time since Nicholson was part of Hockey Canada, but certainly through the early 2000s when a lot of this stuff was established, he was part of it. So we will see what that next set of hearings brings to bear. Rick, continued good work on this file.
Thank you, Ryan.
And time to say good morning to our good friend Pierre LeBrun. And first time on Got Your Back, NHL edition, Cheryl Pounder. Poundy, how are you?
I'm good. I am, I'm not, my kids are at school, so this is a good thing. And I'll be back in the rink tonight running hockey practice. So the usual, it's all hockey. And I like that jersey you got going on there, Pierre. My husband would love it.
Oh, my goodness.
You know what? It's now become so much part of my identity that.
Do you own anything else?
I double down.
Do you own any other casual clothes that do not have that emblem on it?
It's about a 50% share in my closet. Yeah, it's what my kids buy me all the time. So it's not been a fun team to cheer for about 25 years.
Oh man!
And now, whatever. I'm not hiding from
Whatever. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to call my husband down here so we can have a look at it because he's a huge fan and he's been going through the same pain that you've been going through.
Oh, so he's a Cowboys fan too.
He is.
Oh,
he's a
really?
Huge Cowboy fan. So we stay out of the football room when it comes time because we usually know how it's going to end. Sorry, Pierre. So we all get away and we get out of the room.
I mean, the good thing is I am mentally prepared for it every January, so it's not a shock to me. Even
Pierre,
though
are you grumpy after a loss, Pierre? Like, what does it look like for you? How long does it last?
It depends on the type of year, the type of loss that it is. I honestly, truly, and people who know me in my social circle know that I said this before last year's loss to San Francisco. I thought they were going to lose a close game, and that's exactly what happened. And part of that is that I didn't think the 49ers should be in a walkout game on the road. I thought they were a better program than that. Just so happens they got it together at the end. So I was ready for that one, but there are other years. Where it just pulls your guts right out. Yeah.
You're breaking it all down. NFL analyst Pierre LeBrun, I love it, and longtime beleaguered Cowboys fan. So we're going to go around the horn on NHL news in a couple of minutes here. I wanted to just touch on the meetings yesterday involving Hockey Canada. To me, they took on a much different tone than the first set of meetings. It seemed much more defiant tone, I think, from Hockey Canada. I think there was a strategy session they had, and they changed tactics a little bit. And I think as a result of that, there were some things that were said that made headlines. Are the lights going to stay on? Giving Scott Smith an A grade for his performance in the position. There were some headlines made that I think probably turned this thing even further in the wrong direction from a PR standpoint for Hockey Canada. Cheryl, obviously you have very close ties with Hockey Canada, years and years competing for them. I guess I'll start with you and just how this second set of meetings and this whole story, frankly, is hitting you. You had some very moving words at the start of the World Junior Hockey Championship, and we appreciated you sharing then. Fast forward a month or two, and where's your head at on all of this?
Yeah, and it's so difficult, right, guys? Right? It's just the constant talk around what's going on, and to be truthful, I've kind of pulled back a little bit in terms of watching. Of course, I'm not in that courtroom, and really just took a different approach in terms of, listen, I work with the youth. I work with multiple teams, young women that play the game that we love. And so what can we do? What can I do? What can the staff do to foster an environment that gets away from negativity? And so how do we help these young athletes grow, be confident, be good citizens in society? So what it's done for me is it's forced me to say, what can I do through this to ensure that I'm doing my part as an educator or as a coach within the room? And so it's opened up a lot of discussion. I'm not going to lie, within staff or within the room about, whether it's discrimination, whether it's how we react to one another, what's accepted, what's tolerated, what's not. And it opens up that dialogue and conversation to these young women to feel comfortable to talk about, to own up to what's going on within a room, and really just giving them a voice in this and saying, you love the sport. We love the sport. We know all the great memories that I've gotten from it. I know, they're getting from it. And then there's also times when there are negative things that happen and that we have to find a way to curb. And so I think it's been pretty consistent now with all of this messaging that's going on, that people have had enough. People want change, want engagement, change that we can see, actionable change. And so where does it start? And so I just trying to be a player in that. And because I feel like that right now is the impact that I can have within that group.
Yeah, a couple of things for me. Certainly on a personal level, Cheryl's similar reaction for me in terms of the kind of conversations that we've had in our household, my wife and I, throughout the summer, throughout the off season, leading into this hockey season, about hockey culture. And also, again, on a personal level, I've decided to spend more time in my kids' hockey lives. I have 3 kids who play rep hockey. I'm now on the bench for one of my daughter's teams. And that's important to me because I think hockey parents have a big role in trying to get hockey culture in a better place. Huge role. And so I feel I have a part in that. On the more, on the scale of what Ryan was talking about and what happened yesterday with the hearings, regardless of where you are and where this should all go. And to me, again, the most important thing is that Hockey Canada is in a place at the end of all this, at the end of this reckoning, that there are processes in place that make sure that this type of thing is handled in a completely different way and in a more transparent way moving forward. I think everyone can agree on that.
Yeah.
But in the here and now, there's no question that wherever you stand on Hockey Canada leadership, the public has lost confidence. I mean, it felt like one of the last straws to me yesterday and seeing those interactions. And, I don't know how this doesn't end with, frankly, a change of leadership, but, we'll see where it goes.
And I love
and
that
we'll have lots
that.
more. Yeah. Sorry,
No, I
Cheryl.
was going to say transparency and authenticity, I think, are things, 2 words that really resonate right now. And when you get trust within relationships, it's because of transparency and authenticity. And I think you're bang on there, Pierre, with that. And for myself, you mentioned being on the bench. I think it's a real time for reflection. And if we can all sort of just introspect and go there to reflection and say, when I'm on that bench, how am I speaking to the kids, or when is it time to be accountable and when is it time? And so learning from a younger age and learning as an adult, learning as an adult.
Mm.
And so I think there's a piece and an element here of reflection for everyone within the game, and making sure that they're transparent and authentic as they can be, and we all learn as we go.
Absolutely. And we'll have more on this a little bit later on in the podcast. Scott Burnside is going to check in our straight to the point segment with an editorial on what he saw with the meetings yesterday. Okay. Let's get to the National Hockey League specifically and start to break things down. This is the breakdown brought to you by Pro Hockey Life. And they are wanting to remind you that their expert pro shop technicians can provide you with a wide variety of skate sharpening and profile options to best suit your skating style. You got to have those skates done right between their professional by hand sharpening and the Sparks automatic sharpening machines. They make sure you walk out with the perfect edge on your blades. Go check it out for your tune-up, your repair, your skate stretch. They can replace your rivets, coppers, eyelets, holders, or steel, straighten your steel. They even do work on inline skates. Poundy, you got to have the blades exactly how you want the blades.
Oh, you got to have them exactly the way you want them. I'm still using my ancient, I think my Vapor 10s from way back in the day. So I don't know if I can actually comment on this. I was the one that never really taped my stick because I never had the puck on it. But the skating and the edge work, absolutely. It's critical. And one of my coaches the other day we got to talk to them because got his blade cut in half and they couldn't replace it. They couldn't find a blade to match
ancient.
the age of the actual skate. So
Pierre,
what are you coaching
in?
Age.
Pierre, what are you coaching in, buddy?
I got some bars a couple of years ago. I forget which brand exactly, but it's funny hearing Cheryl talk. I keep thinking that one of my weaknesses as a hockey parent is that I keep forgetting, how often I need to get my kids skate sharpened. So I'm always like, how many sessions has it been again? And I grab the skate and I feel it with my thumb. And it's like, I always feel like I'm 2 or 3 sessions behind.
Get into Pro Hockey Life, buddy.
Me. Yeah, exactly.
Get into Pro Hockey Life. They'll keep you square.
I'm way more than 2 to 3 behind. I'm telling you, they start sliding on the ice and I'm just going, what's wrong with you? And that's where I got to really reflect and not yell, right? And they're flying everywhere. The next thing you know, have a look down, there's a chunk out of the steel and you're like, yeah, okay, that's why.
Boy.
Just like bend your knees, dig in a little more.
Well, Pro Hockey Life can fix all those problems for you, Poundy, no question. Okay, the news of the day yesterday, Matthew Barzal, brand new contract with the New York Islanders. 8 years, $73.2 million, $9.15 million on the cap, given to Barzal by Lou Lamoriello. He's 26 next year, 34 when the deal ends. He had 15 goals last year. He's got 2 power play goals in the last couple of seasons. He scored on a 20-goal pace twice in his career. This feels like a lot of money for a guy who's really, really good, but not necessarily high-end superstar status. Feels like an overpay to me. Just right, guys? Or overpay, Poundy?
I'm going overpay here. And, they're setting an internal cap for sure. Lou Lamoriello was a little bit surprising for me, given Lou and, Matt Barzal. I mean, we know what he did in his Calder year. He came in, I think he had something like 59 points. And I think that was the trajectory that they thought he was going to be on. But, we haven't seen that from him. But obviously they do believe that there's more in there. They believe he's the future of this franchise. Obviously, they think that, he's going to lead them in terms of their forward group. So they're sending a big message here. I mean, Anders Lee's not making that much. You talk about young guys like Wallstrom coming up. I mean, they clearly think he's one of is their guy up front. And, the skill set that he has. But in terms of delivery, we haven't seen that same breakout season since his rookie year. So I think it's an overpay.
85 points that rookie year, by the way, Pierre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly might be. I'll just play devil's advocate to balance out the conversation here. A couple of things to look at. One is that it's easy to feel overpay, and then I sit back and I look at and I was just talking to a GM about this morning, in fact, about where the cap we think is headed over the next couple of years. It's going to stay stable for another year, just go up $1 million, but then it's going to jump in 24 and 25. Yeah. And so teams and agents teams in particular, are really trying to get ahead of what sounds like it's going to be a pretty dramatic bump and therefore a bump in salaries. And so remember, this is a max term extension. So the idea from the Islanders' point of view, and it could be proven wrong to your point, both of you, but is that by midway through this deal, if Barzal gets back to where they believe his offensive output should be, it might actually be quite fine. But how do you know that? Number two is, the Islanders have played a certain style. Now we'll see this year, different head coach, but the Islanders have been a pretty defensive-oriented team,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of people feel has stifled some of Barzal's creativity and potential offensive output. And I think that played into this too. I can tell you that some of the comparisons that were used in the negotiation from Barzal's camp were that of Matthew Tkachuk and Braden Point in terms of their contracts, et cetera. So from that perspective, the deal certainly lines up. But yeah, I agree with you guys that he needs to be better offensively for this deal to make sense. There's no
Well, yeah, I
question
think
about it.
with his in around the 60-point mark in around the past, couple seasons, you mentioned 85 in his Calder season. I think they were projecting
59 and 73 last year.
Yeah. So it's 59 and 73. I mean, yeah, there's some injuries there and what have you. But when I think he was projecting coming off that Calder year, as you mentioned, with 85 points, that, this guy is going to be a 100-point player. And so they obviously still think that he has that capability. Obviously, his hands are unique. He's a puck handler. Sometimes I think he needs to distribute a little bit earlier. But one of the things that I've noticed is that, as you mentioned, with the coaching change, I'm interested to see how much they get away from necessarily chip and chase and allow a guy like Barzal to really open up his world when he hits the playground, his playground, and through the offensive zone.
Yeah, I covered Barzal at a world championship a number of years ago, and he was first bursting onto the scene. And I remember watching him even in practice and thinking, oh my goodness, these puck skills are unbelievable. His ability to grab that thing and handle it and make moves on the fly. Definitely sensed some frustration about distributing it enough, moving it around enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Those were in the early days of his career. And listen, Lou Lamoriello even talked yesterday about how he's made improvements in his defensive game, but there's still a ways to go in that. And that will always be a work in progress. Let's hear from Lou. Yeah. Sorry, Pierre.
I was just going to say quickly, also as part of the background in this negotiation, even though Lou Lamoriello might perhaps downplay this, the Islanders really, were hit hard when they lost John Tavares, but didn't just lose him, but they lost him for nothing, and had a chance for a year to deal with his contract and perhaps trade him or not trade him. And so, how much of that is baked into the decision to be this aggressive and making sure this time they get Barzal signed?
And another thing to keep in mind, they didn't come up with a lot in free agency this year. I mean, Romanov was basically their main addition. There were no significant additions to add help for Barzal on the offensive front. But classic Lou Lamoriello when asked about paying a guy to be the face of the franchise.
First of all, I don't think anybody is the face of the franchise.
Right.
The logo is the face of the franchise, and I'll repeat that as many times as someone asks me that. But Matt, I'm a fan because Matt has the ability to raise his game and to be a special player. And now with this contract and our faith in him, puts that responsibility on him. We're trusting that. Now it's up to him also to respond to that.
So Barzal did a media availability yesterday as well. I thought it was interesting. He was really honest about the difference between playing out your contract year and having to sort of show them in your contract year versus getting the deal done ahead of time, and the different headspace that you end up in, guys, when you get it done a year out.
Anytime you can go out that year and want to prove yourself and to sign that big deal, but it's a lot of individualistic thoughts throughout the year. You're playing mostly for yourself, so I'm glad I can get this done and play for the team and just commit to winning.
Some really honest comments there from Barzal. Cheryl, what do you make of it?
Well, I think this is a guy that wants to be on the island, and that's sending a huge message, not just to the team, but to the fan base, to everyone, that he's bought in. He wants to be there. He's talked about how much he loves it. So I think that's critical. I think he's willing to work on his game. I think he has respect for Lou and vice versa. But it is interesting. There's work to be done there in terms of generating the offense. You talked about his two-way game needing, improving, but his work off of the puck, I think, which is the big thing right there. And of course the distribution, which I think Timmy Stützle needs to work on too, but we don't want to talk about him.
Well,
but I think it's great. It's great for the island. They did, again, the acquisitions in the offseason haven't, everyone's been talking about what's going on. Are we getting any other pieces? So they've really stated their claim here, and they've said this is where the direction we're going in with Barzal.
And every player that's in this situation is different. You see it over
Yeah.
the years. Some players have a comfort level in having a show me year and strengthening their UFA case. And other players, like the relief of getting that year out of the way and signing ahead of time. I think in baseball, Aaron Judge is showing us how he feels about playing out his contract.
Bet on
How about
yourself,
that?
eh?
Bet on yourself.
Right.
What was it? I wrote it down. What was the amount that he turned down? Turned down a 7-year, $213 million deal.
Right.
A couple hundred mil, right?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
And I think he made a wise choice. But, going back to the Tavares thing, which I'm sure Islanders fans wish I would let go. But I remember being, in Long Island the year that Tavares was playing out his final year and all the hoopla that was around it. And it was crazy. And
I was in some of those media scrums too.
Right.
It was nonstop for a season.
And my point is, Barzal was sitting a couple of stalls down from that, from Tavares, and was a witness to everything that played out that year. And I wonder if he just said, you know what, that's not for me. Yeah. I don't want to go through that. And, Steven Stamkos is another one that we all covered, and the angst and the emotion, and actually having UFA presentations from a number of teams, but then deciding to go back to Tampa. That was a crazy week in the life of Steven Stamkos. And so I think some players are like, you know what? I like it here. This is a really good contract. I'm just going to sign.
They did throw $9.15 million in front of it. That might have had something. Yep, I'll do that one.
$9 million. I can handle that. I make $1,500 a month playing for the national team.
Hey, before we move on to Jacob Chychrun, what would you guys have done with the home run ball? The fella that caught it there, Corey Ewens, was his name. He was escorted out of the stadium, out of the ballpark. Apparently, he's already got offers in the $2 million range. I'll go first. I am selling that thing all day long. Highest bidder, pay me and move along. I have no need to put that thing in a glass case in my basement.
I'm selling it. Selling it all day long. I am so with you, Ryan. We got kids we got to put through school. Well, they can kind of work themselves too, but we want to be able to help a little bit. I'm
Pierre, how about you? You're a bit of a historian, Pierre. Are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I might have kept it for a while, but although I probably would have succumbed to the pressure from the Yankees. But
does the volume does the value go up or down if you wait longer? Like a year later, is it worth more or not as much?
Yeah, what if someone hit 63 next year? There is that.
Well, that's a good point by you. Sell it while it's at its most value. If someone gets off to a hot start next year, or if he gets off to a hot start next year, I'm selling that thing all day long. Pierre, for sure. Pierre, what's the latest on Jacob Chychrun?
I think the sense that I got looking into it the last couple of days is that for one, in case people were wondering, I don't believe the price has gone down from the Arizona Coyotes for Jacob Chychrun, which has really been the number one reason why he hasn't been traded yet since being on the market for a year. But the Coyotes, I'm told from other rival front offices, are still looking for 2 first-round picks as part of the package, and plus a third asset, which is either a young player or a prospect. It's a high price, but as someone said to me, you look at the Brandon Hagel trade last year and what Tampa paid. Chychrun's on a cheap deal as a top 4 defenseman. A couple of years ago, you saw his offensive output, so the Coyotes are valuing him quite high. The other thing involved here is that I also think that some of the teams that remain interested, that have kept in touch with Arizona, also probably want to see him come back and play some games for the Coyotes. Right. Remember, he's been on the mend. He had the ankle, which is 100% now, we're told. Also had the wrist surgery. He got the same doctor as Austin Matthews do the wrist. And he's on the mend from that. And it sounds like late October for a potential return for him. And I kind of feel like maybe that is also a factor in why it hasn't happened yet. But, listen, he's come out publicly and talked about the fact that he would welcome a deal. The Coyotes are intent on dealing him, but, sit back and look at what Bill Armstrong has done in his short time as Coyotes GM. You may remember this, Ryan, with your coverage of the Oilers, but, he held on to Darcy Kemper probably a year longer than a lot of people thought Darcy Kemper would be in Arizona.
Yeah, for sure.
And part of that
thought they were going to get him.
Yeah, and part of that was that he was asking for a lot for Darcy Kemper, and teams are like, come on. Well, guess what happened on July 28th, 2021?
Yep.
The Colorado Avalanche failed to re-sign Grubauer. They struck out on other UFA goalies, and the clock struck, and they were like, we need a goalie. We're trying to win a cup here. And they paid a crazy price for Darcy Kemper. You know what? They do it again because they ended up winning the cup 12 months later. But the point being is that I always believe in looking at how a GM handle other situations. I think Bill Armstrong is willing to be patient here and wait till someone gets at least close to his price.
Has the legend of Jacob Chychrun grown substantially with all this time he's spent at the top of trade bait boards? I mean, don't get me wrong. He's a good defenseman. 18 goals a couple of seasons ago. That's going to turn heads.
Yeah.
Right.
A bit of a down year last year, but it feels like that legend has really grown, Cheryl, in the time that he's been on this trade bait board.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've been, in those shows and just kind of watching and waiting and saying, oh, who's he going to? The Senator's going to grab him. Is this the Oilers? And just keep continually going. And so I absolutely think that it's growing with every minute, and is legend as well. But I mean, he's a 24-year-old defender. I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'2". He's got a decent contract, but the asking price is going to be the big question. And who has to tag along with it. I mean, if you're someone like the Ottawa Senators, you don't want to give up a Shane Pinto, or, there's a lot. What is the asking price? So I think that's a big one. But when you talk about defenders, I mean, there's not a lot to go around. And that's the big thing, to be able to get a good quality top four defender who can play some tough minutes in his defensive end. He's got mobility. He can walk the line. He's got that great shot. So I think there's a lot of stuff there as well. And if he has a more extensive forward group, let's be honest, what can he do from an offensive standpoint? So I think it's going to continue to move on here. But again, it's going to be patience on behalf of Arizona, or whether someone's just going to lose patience and give him the ass. But with the cap, not a lot of teams are there and able to do it.
Well, and that's why I think Ottawa and Columbus check off a lot of boxes for a number of reasons. There is I think an obvious need on the blue line for both those organizations to add a piece like Jacob Chychrun. B, they have the cap room. Yeah. They have the wherewithal. They're both trying to advance their program now, right? Columbus signs Johnny Gaudreau. They're not going to sit there and build for 5 years. They're trying to get better in a hurry. The Senators have obviously announced themselves as wanting to take that next step. They're loaded up front, but they have a hole or two in the blue line. So I think those two teams remain interested, is my understanding. I think they'll keep looking at it. I also think the LA Kings are kind of lurking without as much fanfare. And I think Rob Blake has checked in on Jacob Chychrun a number of times.
Good young decor out there coming too.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the Kings are loaded on the right, both at the top and coming through the pipeline, not as much on the left. So it's always been, I think, a match that could make sense. But again, the price, we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And some reporting from Aaron Portzline out of Columbus, too, in this last week. Chychrun doesn't have the no trade. It's not like he can control where he goes, but Columbus is not a team that wants to trade for players that don't necessarily want to be there, especially giving up a lot of assets. The initial sense on Chychrun, according to Portzline, was that Columbus wouldn't have necessarily been on his list after the offseason, after getting Johnny Gaudreau with the system that they're putting in place. Portzline reporting on some sourcing that Chychrun would, in fact, be open to making a long-term home in Columbus. And that, of course, a consideration for the Blue Jackets with any trade that they make, because they have that history of bringing guys in and then not being able to retain them. Every offseason, there's interesting storylines on young players. How are they going to do? Usually centered around the draft. So Uri Slafkovsky and Shane Wright. Let's check in and see how these guys are doing in preseason. From a points standpoint, it's been slow for both of them. Slafkovsky will go with first in his 4 games, 1 assist. He played over 22 minutes in that game last night, so he's being pushed. But Pierre, what are you hearing out of Montreal on the early returns on Slafkovsky and the chances that he'll be able to stick around for opening night?
They gave him the big opportunity last night, right? Played on the line with Suzuki and Caulfield. It's going to be interesting to me. I think Kent Hughes is quite serious when he's told a lot of us that they are willing to put him in Laval if they feel that's what's right for him. The comment that stands out for me from Kent Hughes on Slafkovsky is that what they care about is that he is at the peak of his potential development in a number of years from now, when they believe they will be competing and be a contender, versus his contributions this year when they're rebuilding.
Yeah.
Not a lot
Makes
of GMs will
sense.
come out and say that. Yeah, but the point being that regardless of optics, because so few first overall picks, don't start the year with their NHL team, the Habs aren't getting as caught up in that. Now, again, it may be that it makes sense for them to start with him on the opening night roster and then look at his development and then make a call, because he can go up and down between Laval and Montreal. And I think there's a chance that what we actually see this year is a hybrid that way, that he spends time in both.
And I would agree with you. And I think a lot depends on, I do think my gut is that he'll start this season with Montreal. And I had the opportunity to work the game the other day where he was playing versus Toronto. And again, you're almost waiting for something. And sometimes it's not just flash and dash with these guys, what he did at the Olympics, or he's done on the international stage. But you're kind of waiting for him to do something. You don't really see him. And then all of a sudden there's a little bit of a spark. And so for me, with his size, obviously the Montreal Canadiens can use that size up front in particular if he's playing with a Caulfield or a Suzuki. But the other side of it is, one of the things that I thought, a detail to his game that I thought he was pretty effective at, that I don't always think that, we recognize in game, is just the way he does shield and protect the puck. So most of his moves were pushing to the middle of the ice, using his leverage, using his size to be able to get a shot off. But as the game went on, I thought he got better, in particular in that game against the Leafs. And when he was getting better, what it meant, he wasn't afraid to drive the dot. It's almost like he got, I'm going to start attacking now. I'm not just going to sit. And he found his way to those spots. So, this can be a product too of getting comfortable, playing with the regular players and starting to work your way up to speed, and certainly takes time. But yeah, I'm with you, Pierre. I think he'll start just being that number one pick, the perception around it. I think they'll give him an opportunity, but at the same time, you can't risk development. So if Laval's the place for him, I agree that it'll be a hybrid, and it's a hybrid, and it's going to be the right move, because, they need him to be a star in the game. They chose him to be that rare player. So he needs to be, and they need to give him the opportunity to be. I mean, he's only 18 years of age.
I wouldn't do it, guys. I wouldn't do it. Sorry. The risk reward. I would send him back unless it is patently obvious that he's ready to step in and contribute. You start him in the National Hockey League and it doesn't go well. In the media frenzy that is Montreal, he's slow and doesn't do much in the first 5 games. Now you send him back and he's failed. Now you send him back and it hasn't gone well, and he's dropped the ball, and the number one pick wasn't able to cut it, and he's failed. And it might not be that harsh. Why set him up that way? Make it very clear. We expect him to be here at some point this year, but we believe the best spot for him to start getting his game underneath him in North America is in the American Hockey League. They have such a unique opportunity with a first-round pick not to have to choose between the NHL and junior, and you get one chance to make that decision in training camp. And you can choose with this guy.
Yeah, I've talked with a number of front offices this week about this. I mean, teams still feel they wish they had that AHL option for their first round picks, which they don't have if he's a Canadian junior player. And I think back, Ryan, just thinking of the Oilers, to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and whether he was ready for his first NHL season physically.
Yep.
But the options are junior NHL, right? It's tough in that scenario.
And I think that's the correct mentality to have, Ryan, like, no question. But when you're heading into opening night and want to start well, like, is he good enough to be on the roster at this moment, or what's in his best interest? And I think those are two very different questions, and you have to be willing to be open and authentic about the development and where you see your team in a few years. And I can go back. I mean, yes, it's women's hockey, my start. I made the team when I was 17 years of age with the national team, and I wasn't ready. I was 17 years of age. I wasn't physically mature enough. I didn't, recognize, the pace of the game. And I got cut the following year, and I was crushed. My confidence was down. It took me years to get back because I wasn't ready to be there, even though my skill set would have said, oh yeah, she's good enough to be here. But from a standpoint of every other aspect, I was not ready. And I was forced into that situation, of course, willingly at the time, because anytime you want to be out with the big club, you want to be with the big club. But at the end of the day, the best thing for my development would have been not to have been there at that time. Yeah. So, because it would take me years to garner the confidence and get over it. And you know what it does internally to you as an athlete too. I mean, people can say, oh yeah, you're a professional athlete. You don't think this way. Well, guess what? It's not easy when there's a lot of pressure on you. So there's a couple of trains of thought here for sure.
The decision-making process is different for Seattle and Shane Wright. They have that choice. They don't have that choice. Pierre, what are you hearing about the likelihood that Shane Wright sticks around? 4 games played, he's got an assist, he's got 8 shots on net, but I think underwhelming based on a lot of the reports I'm reading out of Seattle. What are you hearing?
So it just so happens that I chatted with Ron Francis, the Kraken GM, yesterday.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
For a piece that's coming out in The Athletic. And obviously we talked about Shane Wright. I didn't specifically ask him about what he thought about his camp so far, but we talked about, Shane Wright dropping the 4, and in many ways why Seattle and the patient approach of Ron Francis might turn out to be the perfect place for Shane Wright to start his career. And here's part of what Ron Francis said. I'm just reading the quote, but I'm really pleased with what we see. He thinks the game well. He sees the game at a high level. His hands are extremely quick. It's just going to take some time to understand the pace of the game, the flow of the game as he matures. So I said, well, is he starting the year in Seattle? And Ron Francis said, I would believe he's starting the season in Seattle. And then I went back and I said, well, is he playing the whole year in Seattle? And he said, I don't want to draw a line in the sand, but I would think he's with us for the year. It's just a matter of how things go and managing it, et cetera, et cetera. So not a 100% guarantee, but certainly leaning heavily in terms of that is the plan for Seattle.
Man, I would be so careful with this. I would be so careful with this. And I've seen it up close here in Edmonton with a couple of number 1 picks that came in.
Well, that's why I mentioned
Yakupov. I mean, Nugent Hopkins was in the Calder conversation his rookie year, so debatable whether he should have been there or not. But they're so young. They're young down the middle. I mean, I was looking at their stat. They were just getting chewed up in the face-off circle. All their young centers were. You go into a situation where you're forced to take on too much too soon. And I don't know. How often have guys been hurt by going back to junior, Cheryl?
Yeah, and it's such a tough call. I'm with you. And I mean, even with Shane Wright, the nuances of his game aren't flash either. So I think over the course of his years, as he was projected as a number 1, everyone expects to see these elite skills like these Connor Bedard sort of things. But that's not the case with him. I mean, he does everything really well. But you're right. I mean, you think about the physical maturation that happens. I mean, the way you process the game, I think that's got to be the biggest thing for a young athlete. Having the ability to process it quicker and slow the game down. And you just don't have that ability until you've actually played games. And obviously there are some athletes that can do it much quicker than others, but just honing those skills that elevate you and prepare you to hit that next step. And when you don't get those pieces, sometimes you can drop further. So, because it kills the confidence and then you're getting away from your actual game. So I think this, you got to tread water with this one, Ryan. You really do. But it's tough again when you're sitting there and you're looking at a roster and you're saying, yeah, but is he good enough to be here at the moment? So I think
if you're at 8 games and he's not thriving, send him down. I'm talking thriving, not looks like he might be okay.
This is the whole for me in the way the system is set up. And listen, GMs have talked about this for years with me that they wish there was an exception made for maybe, is it a top 10 pick? Is it a first round pick? Is it a top 5 pick? GMs have talked about this forever. In the 28 years I've covered the NHL, this subject has come up a ton where could there be an exception that the options aren't just Canadian junior NHL, but that you could send a kid to the AHL. But in Shane Wright's case, he's played a couple of years in the Ontario Hockey League. So just to play devil's advocate again, how much more is he going to learn from going to junior? I mean, is the answer here, again, what I just talked about?
Well, he ain't burning a year of entry level.
Well, my point being, isn't the AHL maybe the best place for him, except he can't go there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But junior leagues won't like that. They don't want to lose those high-end players when they have a chance to have them back. But anyways, yeah, for sure. All right, great stuff, guys. That was the breakdown brought to you by Pro Hockey Life. How are you feeling, Calgary Flames and Ottawa Senators fans? You feeling like, I'm thinking about the Calgary Flames and their fans and their sweaters. I mean, I was in the playoffs last year. It was nothing but Gaudreau and Tkachuk sweaters. You have an entire fan base that needs new sweaters. And Pro Hockey Life is the place to go to get yourself outfitted with either a Florida Tkachuk jersey or a Columbus Gaudreau jersey. Does your allegiance go with the player? or does it stay with? My guess is they'll be buying Huberdeau and Kadri and Uyghur jerseys. But fans, if you're looking to get yourself squared away with apparel for the upcoming year, go to Pro Hockey Life. Okay, before we let you guys go, back by popular demand. I mean, I've just been inundated with requests. So you're going to do another Quandary, right? We had such success with our Quandary in our opening episode. So these are little things that happen along the way in life's journey that we just maybe don't always know the answer to. This is the Quandary this week, and I put this one out on Twitter. Cheryl, Pierre, focus your brain on this Quandary. Hotel soaps, shampoos. Okay? When you stay at a hotel, is it okay for you to each day take the soaps, the little ones that are provided for you, and chuck them into your bag? They then get replenished the next day. And so you chuck them into your bag. And then they get replenished the next day and you chuck them into your bag. And then you take them home. And then you have that neat little bowl at home where you've got all sorts, right? You're basically collecting. Is it okay to do that or not? I submit to you that it is criminal activity. You are stealing.
Well, you're making way too much money then, Rye, because absolutely I steal every single time when I go to a hotel. I'm going to add to it. I take the Keurigs, whether I use them or not.
Well, that's next level right there. That is next level.
We need to get this girl a raise. What's going on? Is that where it ends?
That is expensive, man. You got to keep those Keurigs, whether you have the coffee or not.
I've never taken the soap home from a hotel, but I guess what I would say is the soap hotel price is baked into your hotel charge in the sense that it may be different for you guys, but I notice every time I use a soap in a shower at a hotel that the next day after my room was clean, there's a new soap waiting there. They didn't just let the old one there so that I could use it during my stay, which I think is very wasteful, by the way. But my point is that obviously that price of the soap on a daily basis is baked into the economics.
Okay.
So I haven't brought the soap home, but I got no problem with it morally or ethically, to your question of the con.
I don't do it all the time, but if you really like the scents that are there, why not take them? And listen to this, okay? So let's say you're calling a game or you're at a game and you get in after the game. You don't even check into your hotel till after the game. So you get in at midnight and you leave at 8 a.m. and you paid full pop for that hotel.
$300.
Okay. You should be able to take the robe.
Oh, Poundy.
I'm kidding. I don't take the robe.
You're going to be on some secret a list in the hotel community here soon after watching this podcast.
If you're charged for a couple $100 for a night and you get there at midnight and you leave you're flying out, you leave at 7 a.m. I mean,
why not throw the pillows in?
Taking the water in the room. Do you take the bottle of water with you when you haven't opened it?
Oh yeah. I mean you can use
again baked in, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about stockpiling it through the course. Like if you take it the next morning and it's a one-nighter, fine. I'm talking about, and I know people who will go unnamed because I think that it's criminal activity, who literally every day take it and be like, oh, there's some soap for when we get home, and there's some soap for when we get home. That's stealing.
But by the way, hotels are getting wise. I don't know if you remember, Ryan, the hotel we stayed in Denver for the Stanley Cup final.
Oh yeah, the ones on the wall.
They have the pumps on the wall in the shower now where you have to pump out the soap.
All y'all criminals out there ruined it for the rest of us.
Maybe your friends that take them all will bring Tupperware.
I put this question to Twitter. We thank everybody for their responses. Cam Cole, who, by the way, weighed in on our quandary last week, says, built into the cost of your room, you're fine. Steve Delansky said, the line is at rating the cart. In your room, it's yours to take. You know, when you see the cart in the hallway, I know we all think it. You're looking at it like, ooh, there's some stuff on there. But that is flat out stealing. Have you ever taken
water off the cart? Have you ever taken water off the cart, Rye? Have you ever done it?
Yeah, I've taken water off the cart, but my intention wasn't to stuff it in my bag and then hydrate my children when I get home.
I'm telling you, the Keurig one, though, I mean, absolutely. It's like $10. It's like $14 for or 9 of them, 12 of
Yeah.
them.
So Lori says, I just stayed at a hotel on a work trip for $400 for one night, and it was just a regular room. They had the shampoo, etc., in dispensers. So I took the coffee pods, shower
See,
cap,
told you.
pen,
What's her name?
paper, pretty much everything else instead. Wouldn't
See?
normally, but $400 a night? Come
That's what
on.
I'm saying. And then you go into your suitcase when you get home and you put them right where where your Keurig is.
Lori, I'm not
Come
going to
on.
say your
On the
last
road.
name. That's criminal activity. Okay, here on Got Your Back for our quandary segment, we do have an ultimate arbiter. Terry Ryan is the ultimate arbiter, the voice of reason on all quandary-related items. And here he is.
As the ultimate arbiter, I've come to a decision. When it comes to body lotion, conditioner, shampoo, and body wash, I treat the bathroom in a hotel like grandma's cookie jar on my birthday.
Yeah.
What I can get, and that's usually a lot.
That's
With all the things that can possibly go wrong in a hotel room, and often do, like noisy guests, poor Wi-Fi, temperature issues, not enough hot water, bugs, hidden fees, free continental breakfast featuring cold coffee, a rock-hard donut, and pulpy orange juice. Like I said, it's the cost of doing business for the hotel. The least they can do is get me a few toiletries for the way home. You know what I'm saying? Final decision.
Final decision
Yes.
on our quandary this week from Terry Ryan. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rethink my life here. I still think you're all a bunch of criminals.
Well,
Thanks,
that's why
guys.
we're going. That's why they're going dispenser though. They're way ahead of
Yeah.
you, Ryan. The hotels know what's going on.
Yeah. So next thing, you animals will be tearing the dispensers off the wall, justifying that too.
I would just come with your little carry and go and dispense it in there.
Just
with
fill
your
them.
little lid on it.
Poundy, enough.
I would not do it.
Enough. All right, that was the breakdown. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Still lots more to come here on Got Your Back, including Straight to the Point, where we will check in with longtime NHL veteran reporter Scotty Burnside. See you guys. Cheers.
Bye.
We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that. Time now for our weekly editorial segment here on Got Your Back. Straight to the point. And once again, we turn to veteran NHL scribe Scott Burnside, who gets straight to the point on Hockey Canada's Tuesday meetings with the Canadian Heritage Committee.
Here's a little note for Andrea Skinner, the interim board chair of Hockey Canada. Yes, Andrea, the lights in hockey rinks across Canada will in fact stay on, even if you and CEO Scott Smith and the rest of your group take the first exit out of the nearest Hockey Canada building and don't look back. Skinner had the audacity to suggest, in answering questions from MPs who are once again trying to get to the bottom of the ongoing scandal rocking Hockey Canada, why the current leadership group remains in place. There have been calls from MPs and from across the hockey spectrum for Skinner and Smith and the rest to depart, to do the right thing and leave. And yet Skinner wondered, well, if we leave, what will happen? Will the lights stay on? Rarely have I encountered people less self-aware than Skinner and Smith. They see themselves not as part of any kind of problem whatsoever, but as part of a solution. What I wanted to do today was to talk about the people who can be part of the solution for Hockey Canada, who can help create a new landscape, who can help create a culture that is welcoming and open and invites perspectives even from those who've been bullied, who've been sexually assaulted, who have had a miserable time of it, instead of the closed and secretive group that have dominated Hockey Canada for years and years. Skinner and Smith don't seem to see that. And yet it seems patently clear that those who could come to the table, who have ideas, who have fresh perspectives, will not come without that change. We already know people have been approached. They want nothing to do with this with current leadership in place with Hockey Canada. So where does the pressure point come from? Does the IIHF have a role in this? It would be nice to see and hear from them on this matter, put some pressure on Hockey Canada to make changes, meaningful changes. Sponsors who've already withheld hundreds of thousands of dollars from Hockey Canada events, perhaps that needs to continue. And what about those local hockey moms and dads, local hockey groups who have unwittingly paid to help pay off the victims of sexual assault and other miscreant behavior over the years? What if they withheld their money from Hockey Canada? The process is clear. It is a difficult one. It is a long road to recovery for Hockey Canada and a new landscape. There is a chance for the lights to stay on, Andrea. The lights only stay on if you and your group are gone.
And that's going to do it for episode 2 of Got Your Back NHL Edition. LeBrun and Rishaug. Thanks so much to Rick Westhead and Cheryl Pounder, Scott Burnside as well for their contributions today. And a big thanks to our sponsors, Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Pro Hockey Life, and Liberty Smart Security, also a sponsor here on Got Your Back. Hoping to catch up with Florida Panthers head coach Paul Maurice here sometime in the next day or so. So keep an eye on our feed. When we execute that interview, we will push it out to the podcast platform. So keep an eye out for that. We appreciate your subscriptions and your downloads to this point, folks. It's going to be a really fun journey this year. Love doing this podcast with Pierre and looking forward to more of it. Check in on our short shift that will go Monday morning. That'll be a look back at the weekend that was. And then episode 3 will go next Wednesday. Have yourselves an awesome day today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.